Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are joining us from in the world today. A very warm welcome indeed to this concluding event of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture's 2022 Month of March programme. My name is Mark Titterington and it is my pleasure to be your host and to guide you through our programme over the next couple of hours. We'll hear from the European Commission's Directorate General for Agriculture, also from Robert Bonney, the United States Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, from our founding partners and strategic partners who will share with us some of their takeaways from the programme over the last month and also their perspective on where we are on the journey towards the transformation of the food and agriculture system. And if soil health is at the bedrock of a more resilient and sustainable agriculture and food system, then it seems appropriate that we would use today's concluding event to present the prestigious Land Management and Soil Award. But we'll start, as we normally do on these occasions, with someone who needs little introduction from myself. He is, of course, a former European Commissioner for the Environment and Research, a co-chair of the United Nations International Resources Panel. But perhaps more importantly for this afternoon, it's in his position as chairman of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture that he will share his perspectives on where we've come from, where we are, and hopefully where we are going. As always, a great pleasure to welcome you, Janusz Potočnik, to the stage. Over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Dear friends, we have now come to the end of the fascinating month of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Over these last weeks, over 2,000 of us have come together to debate and listen to the views and opinions of others on our food system. And in doing so, we have hopefully moved closer to breaking down the silos that surround us, and also in finding the means to create the transformation. For those who joined us for the main day of the ForumforAg on the 15th of March, you will have heard from an impressive array of speakers, policymakers, farmers, food industry and NGOs. I don't have the time to summarize each session or to pay credit to each of the speakers. And I urge those who haven't already to visit the ForumforAg website to rewatch the events. Instead, I will summarize what were for me some of the key messages that developed over the day. Firstly, I was extremely encouraged to hear that every one of the speakers embraced the need to transformation our food system. This may seem a small thing, but I can tell you 10 years ago we were still debating if the food system needs to be changed. The acceptance that changes must happen should be recognized as an important first step forward. But the challenge now is that we need to find a way to make it happen. The most frequently repeated sentence by many in the last decade was that there is no more time to lose. These are messages given with good intention, and if given without intention, they are only phrases that make us feel better in the moment and serve only to lose us time. It was suggested that we are still speaking different languages, and I have to agree. Only by bringing everyone around the table and jointly creating a true narrative framing the transformation can we move forward collectively. In Per Espen's words, we need to move beyond just the small story to a larger narrative and ask ourselves, how can we paint an authentic story about what a nature-positive and climate-positive food system really looks like? And Matrix will play an important role here. Through Matrix, we can better understand the true cost of our food system, design our policies accordingly, transform our business models, and better inform consumers. Matrix can help create the shared language we need. Part of this narrative also lies with who holds the burden of transformation, an issue that was brought up repeatedly throughout the day. Farmers are often lauded as the solution, the ones that can simultaneously create resilience in our food systems, improve biodiversity and reduce GHG emissions, or the problem. But this was rightly questioned. Farmers can indeed be the solution, but the burden of change should not lie solely on their shoulders. There were calls for the responsibility, the costs, and the risks of the transformation to be equally and fairly shared amongst the whole food chain, from farm to fork. I was particularly struck by the comment of one speaker, Zeno Piatti, an Austrian organic farmer, a farmer who clearly wanted to do right by the environment and the climate, but who honestly told the forum that market mechanisms are pushing farmers like him to marginalize biodiversity if they want to survive. On the one hand, we have the courageous Green Deal pushing farmers in one direction and market mechanisms in another. The comment of Mr. Piatti was the perfect example of the urgent need to align the two. And as Amina Mohammed clearly put it, to stop investing in short-term profits over long-term goals aligned with maximization of the social well-being. The sharing of the burden of our food system will also fall on the consumer. And this was a central part of the discussion of two of the sessions on food pricing. There is, of course, a concern that if we apply true cost accounting to food, we risk increasing the price of food, which will hit the poorest the most. But as said by Pavan Sukhdev, we are already paying for the externalities of food, only through different wallets. We have the money, we pay for the food through the supermarket wallet, but we also pay through the health wallet, the wallet for the costs to future generations, and the wallet for the impact of climate change. The problem is only that these wallets are not kept in the same pocket, nor are the interests connected to them linked to the same people. The message on consumption also came through loud and clear. That if we want to transform our food system, a focus on production alone will never be enough. We must simultaneously address consumption and move our society towards a sustainable diet for their health and for the environment and climate. But again, without proper incentives coming from the market, it is hard to expect that people will behave responsibly against their rational behavior incentives. These debates introduced at the main forum were taken further in over 14 webinars held throughout these 2 weeks, addressing transatlantic dialogue, innovation, livestock systems, scaling regenerative agriculture, soil and biodiversity targets. Again, I urge you to go to the forum website and watch again what were excellent moments of the convergence of different ideas. The crisis in Ukraine has caused some of us to waver in our march forward for change, but it shouldn't. Yes, we do need to develop short-term strategies to address the immediate worrying concerns regarding global food security. But I was encouraged to hear from Maciej Golubiewski, the head of the cabinet of the Commissioner for Agriculture, Janusz Wojciechowski, that he believes this should be at the cost of that should not be at the cost of long-term strategy and Green Deal, because crises will keep on coming, and they will keep coming faster and harder as the effect of the climate change intensifies. And unless we take urgent action now, our resilience to buffer these inevitable future shocks will diminish, and the effects will be worse and more widespread. Dear friends, Sustainable Development Goals have set the right compass to humanity. The European Green Deal is a visionary document acknowledging that future well-being depends on how we will build and respect our relation to nature. And the Farm to Fork strategy, it's a well-intended and designed implementation document. The closer we come creating concrete steps that require agreement and support, the higher the potential resistance, and this comes with no surprise. But change is the only, at least, reasonable option. Constructive engagement on how to make this change happen is thus the only logical approach, also when it comes to the Farm to Fork document. Everything else would I can say again, be postponing the necessary transition, and this would not help anybody, including farmers. Let's keep listening to one another and keep building a collective language to move forward, but to really move forward. Basically, there are two main problems which would deserve special attention. First, our focus and our behavior are too much short-term based. This, through passing time, exposes all our problems linked to fragility and security, and the unwanted events are becoming even more frequent and severe. The COVID experience and the consequences of terrible war in Ukraine are making that more than obvious. Fixing these consequences is of course necessary, but more than that, it is important to start systematically building more resilient economy and society. Only that way we can avoid, or at least limit, the shocks repetitively surprising us, and only that way we will remain credible when claiming necessary attention to be given to food, energy, metal, or any other security and strategical autonomy related challenges. And second, our efforts to green, clean, optimize existing economic model will unfortunately, as well intended they are, not be enough to meet the decarbonization and decoupling targets, and limit in high income countries actually reduce the use of virgin natural resources. If questions related to overconsumption and to the shadows of resource-based imperialism, which have led us to huge resource import dependency, are not addressed sincerely and effectively, the divide among high and low-income countries will only widen. This would not create conditions for the effective international partnerships and sharing of sovereignty needed will be not present. In this interconnected and interdependent world, partnerships based on fairness are critical if we want to fix the challenges we are collectively facing. And we should not forget that standards and behavior patterns linked to the current economic model were set by high-income countries. We are thus bound to show that we are willing and capable to change the reality we have created and lead the transition efforts. I know that the challenges we face today can at times seem insurmountable, but we as humans have risen time and time again through history to face enormous change. And as Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So, dear friends, it is only right to end my concluding remarks by thanking again to all our partners, extraordinary speakers, our moderators, to the team behind the stage, working on technical and other support, and finally to Mark, Emma, and Caroline. They have done the heavy lifting in putting Forum for the Future of Agriculture 2022 together. Take care, and I sincerely hope that we will have a more relaxing summer. I guess we all agree we need it. Thank you.
Yanis, thank you very much indeed for that and your remarks at the end. I think actually the heavy lifting is done by you in trying to draw together in such a clear and succinct manner the different strands that we've heard over the past month on the transformation of the food and agriculture system. You said in your speech that you are hopeful that we've moved closer to breaking down some of the silos and finding the means necessary to create the transformation. I just wonder if you might think or say a little bit more on what you think we need to do to complete this process, to keep the stakeholders together, to ensure that all the necessary actors are working together to deliver that transformation.
Mark, one essential ingredient which I think it's coming together, I have mentioned it already before, it's an agreement that the change is unavoidable and needed. And I think we are pretty much on that equal footing currently. So, without saying, engaging all the actors, it's fundamentally important. So, as I mentioned before, again, it's not only important to look at the farmers, but that we look to the whole food chain, and that we basically look not only to the food chain in production, but also in the consumption part. And like with anything which you want to achieve, building trust, it's fundamentally important. So seeing that we do not agree only when it comes to the messages of the need for transformation, but also that in real terms, when these decisions are on the table, being in approach to production, consumption, or policy documents and reaction to them, it's fundamental. So that's how actually the trust is built, not by talking, let's say, the same language. And in this process, what would be also essential is that we have an agreement that we have to take care for the vulnerable ones, which in many cases in this transformation are basically small farmers, and they are in high numbers in Europe, as we know. And I think it's pretty important that it's understood that their hard work needs fair remuneration, and that they deserve decent conditions for life. One important thing which I'm underlining constantly, it's actually the funding instruments. So in this case, Common Agricultural Policy, of course, CAP, it's the most important. I think we have quite a lot of room of maneuver still to align the funding instrument with the policy documents. Because for me, what would be currently needed is clearly scrap all the environmentally harmful subsidies and use all the potential of public money for focusing on the transformation, helping the vulnerable ones, doing it in fair way, but doing it. Because that's basically so. And just the last message, maybe it was also included in my opening. So while it's really difficult to change incentives to consumers and producers, the reason is very simple. When humans get used to something and we acquire the right to something, it's really difficult to change it. We still need to work systematically on that, because working against the flow of the river, or if you want, swimming against the flow of the river, which we sometimes do if we take that flow of the river as market signals, while the regulation and our efforts are actually swimming, will in long term make us too tired, and this will not work.
I was going to come to a question on sharing the burden across the food system and actors, but maybe before I do that, again, you touched on it in the speech. It's been a backdrop to what we've talked about throughout the month, the tragic conflict in the east of Europe, in Ukraine. How concerned are you that particular challenge might lead to a reversal or perhaps a concentration on production over sustainability?
It's a reasonable concern, because that's how we sometimes tend to react. You have seen the concerns which raised in connection to metals, to gas, to other energy sources, and so on. And my reply to that is, yeah, of course, you have to take that into account, but if we would previously consistently work and understand that Europe is very import import dependent when it comes to energy, when it comes to various kind of materials, metals, when it comes to also to some food ingredients, then it will be better understood how long-term systematic management is actually consistent. Sustainability is consistent with food security. If we only do it and think it in that way, and if we only prepare ourselves so that we, I would not dare to say avoid those shocks, but minimize when and if they are coming.
So let me meet that energy that you have, that you were articulating there in terms of the track we're on. You concluded your speech with an inspiring quote from Margaret Mead. So let me ask you again, how confident are you today that a small group or even a large group of thoughtful, committed citizens can come together to deliver the transformation that we need in the food and agriculture system, both in Europe and indeed globally?
It's not the only challenge which we jointly share. We have to understand that we are the first generation actually which is living in a terribly interconnected and interdependent world. So in this world where this globalization of everything, from internet to, so we have seen that through COVID, we have seen that through climate change and many other things, that there are things which we have to collectively manage, and Earth has become in a way smaller. And but by saying that, so obviously pointing on the necessity to cooperate collectively on a global level, you know, the spark of fire always come from the fire always come from a spark. So I think the power of an example of showing how the things could be different, sharing that through the community, making it reasonably economically attractive also, and showing that the things could be done in different way, it's actually the most powerful thing which could be done. With, of course, policy alignment supporting that, but I think I will always believe in the democratic power of change, and power of change, it's coming from brilliant ideas of small groups also.
Well, Janusz Potočnik, thank you for that concluding remarks and for the questions and the answers that you gave. The Forum is incredibly fortunate to have you as our chairman, and hugely appreciate everything you've done over the past month, but of course over the number of years, and we look forward to working with you as we go forward. Janusz,
thank you, Mark. You are too kind, but let's do what we have to do.
Do what we have to do. Thank you. Well, now we turn to our next contributor this afternoon. We had hoped to welcome the European Commissioner for Agriculture, Janusz Wojciechowski, this afternoon, but unfortunately the Commissioner is unavoidably detained. Nevertheless, we are delighted to welcome back to the Forum, just 2 weeks after he participated in our annual conference, Maciej Golubiewski, who is the head of cabinet in Janusz Wojciechowski's DG Agriculture, and he will deliver the Commissioner's remarks. Maciej, wonderful to have you with us again. Nice to see you. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Commissioner. Very good to have you. Commissioner apologizes. Commissioner is in the midst of dealing with a crisis. So he's busy working away at the taskings that both the Versailles Declaration and the European Council recently gave all of us at the Commission. So we are busily handling the transformation, especially the one that hit us a little bit from the eastern ramparts of Europe. And we need to deal with it. So I think it's an apt time to discuss those issues, and I think the transformation is all the more needed given what's happening to the east of European Union's borders with the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, which was unlawful and completely unprovoked 1 month ago. We need to re-energize ourselves even more to ensure that food is at the front line of this battle. We have to tell the world that we're confident that not only European Union's food security is not endangered, but that we are ready to help the world. And there are parts of the world that are really looking with fear as to the possible consequences of this, what this war can bring to them, especially when it comes to some of the most basic staples like wheat or feed for the farmers. So we are very much, the Commissioner is very much in contact with them in various fora. We are organizing first some support to the Ukrainians which, as I said, we are in constant, almost daily contact with them on ensuring that they continue to export, because we saw some fake news, frankly, on this. The Ukrainians are really interested in continuing exporting that 30% of, well, a bit less with Russia, 30% of wheat, of global wheat, and maize, and all seeds and other things that are so necessary for farmers and producers of food abroad. So we are trying, first of all, to facilitate all sorts of land routes and alternative routes to those that were used before because of the closure of the ports. We're trying to ensure that the farmers have enough fuel. This is also personal deliverable on behalf of the Commission of Commissioner Wojciechowski, whereby we try to enable the transfer of around 50,000 tons of diesel to farmers in need a week to ensure they can grow and go in the fields and grow the food. So, as I said, Commissioner is not here not because he has another meeting, but he's really busy at work, and that is also why I have to shortly leave and help him with those efforts. As the Commission, we are committed to this transformation in a double effort. On one hand, we have our standing commitments with the strategies that we pursue, the Farm to 40. We need to ensure that we are even less dependent on a variety of inputs, and we have to strive for this transformation just like other sectors do. But because without that resilience, we won't be able to maintain our food security in the long run anyway. So we continue on that path, but there is enough flexibility in that approach, especially if you look to the food communication we produced last week, that allows some good, very targeted short-term measures that will also assist farmers in their productivity efforts, be it through some derogations on the fallow land use, where now they can temporarily grow on those set aside land. They can now grow feed and food for feed and food. Crops for feed and food. And also we have the contingency plans, the reserve, the crisis reserve being utilized. We have certain common market measures that are utilized to help some sectors like pig meat to deal with even now a harder situation. We have state aid and a big, great effort here by the Commission and DG Competition to allow farmers to apply for grant aid, especially when it comes to their fertilizer needs, because this is another one that suffered from enormous gas costs that influenced its price. So with all that, we're trying to make our food system more sustainable and resilient for the years to come. As I mentioned, without this sustainability, we know that in the long run there won't be food security. We have to look at here and now as well. We all know, Commissioner, if you were here, he would also like to talk a little bit about the CAP strategic plans. We're looking at them. We are almost finalizing. We are at the level of finalizing our responses to what members submitted, and we really had to take into account the impacts of the war as well on how we see the approach to implementing the CAP should be by member states. But I think Commissioner, in his contacts with ministers, I think they're seeing eye to eye on this. More globally, I mentioned possibly, but I don't remember, a meeting on G7 agriculture ministers where Commissioner also discussed those issues. So we are fully aligned with the G7. We are planning a big G20 meeting, which is a little bit more complicated. Obviously, it's a broader forum where we would also like to show our commitment to ensuring global sustainable transformation that ensures global food security. And we have to remind you that we continue to be part of those 8 global coalitions that came out of the United Nations Food Systems Summit last year. The communiqué that came out, and the actions that come out of it are very much supported. I think are in line with what we like to see, given the new circumstances on the ground. So if we act together, I think the Commission is confident we can overcome the challenges we now face. We can safeguard our security, stability, and sustainability of our food. And I think with that message and best greetings of Commissioner, and also thanks to institutions such as yours at Fora, Mr. Commissioner Potočnik, Mark, everybody involved. Commission is very grateful for those global fora that are so dynamically working in elucidating what the stakes are in this big transformative effort that is ahead of us, and this new situation that's just around the corner. So thank you again. Greetings from Commissioner. Wish you good last hours of the forum, and it was good to be with you. Thank you.
Maciej, thank you very much indeed. I mean, of course, we understand the Commissioner's busy agenda, and we very much appreciate you stepping in to share with us his remarks, and also looking at what action you're taking in the short-term challenges, but also without losing sight of that long-term sustainability goal. Maciej Golubiewski, Head of Cabinet for Commissioner Wojciechowski at DG Agriculture, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, we now turn to the next part of our agenda this afternoon, and it features the Transatlantic Dialogue, which has been a growing focus for the Forum for the Future of Agriculture in recent years. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to join Robert Bonney in Washington, D.C. Robert is the Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation in President Biden's administration. And I asked him what he saw the challenges were for the sector arising from climate change, what the United States is doing about it, and how important he thought transatlantic collaboration was in meeting the global challenges that we face. Here's what he had to say. Robert Bonney, United States Undersecretary of Agriculture, thank you very much indeed for joining us at the Forum for the Future of Agriculture's annual program. It's a great pleasure to be with you and to be hosted here by you at the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. As you know, the Forum continues to explore ways as to how we can accelerate the transformation of the food and agriculture system globally to make it more resilient, even more sustainable, and perhaps most importantly, from a climate change perspective, able to mitigate the effects that that change will have on the sector, and also to make a contribution more globally to mitigating the effects. And in that respect, I'd like to start by asking you about the Climate Smart Commodities program that you recently launched. $1 billion of investment to create voluntary incentives that will boost production of livestock and grain production in ways that reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and sequester carbon. Given the fact that there are similar efforts underway in the European Union today, I know that the Forum and our stakeholders be particularly interested in how important you see this program, given the plethora of priorities that USDA has, and what do you think the critical success factors will be?
It's great to be with you, and great to have this conversation at a really important time for our alliance. And this is a really important program for us. We have a broad set of programs where we're going to work with U.S. agriculture and forestry to both make their operations more resilient and to address climate mitigation. This program in particular is important because, just like you all, we're trying to take advantage of the growing consumer interest, companies that want to green their supply chain, whoever it is. We want to create something that allows agriculture to take advantage of that. And while there's a lot of alignment between good climate mitigation practices in agriculture, soil health can contribute to productivity, improving nutrient management can reduce nitrous oxide emissions, but also improve our farmers' bottom line. There's a lot of alignment there. That doesn't mean there aren't costs. And so what we're trying to do is provide resources to help deploy climate smart practices across farms, ranches, and our forest lands. And then also provide resources for the measurement, monitoring, verification that goes along with that. And to do it in a way that a little bit lets agriculture determine what climate smart commodity, maybe it's a climate smart soybean or climate smart cotton or whatever it is, or maybe they're interested in carbon and reductions there. We're a little bit leaving that to them, but are interested in how can we dramatically scale up the adoption of these practices and then do it in a way that we measure monitoring so we know the outcomes. This is pilots. We're going to learn from these And we also want to make sure that those pilots are broadly reflective of U.S. agriculture. We want small producers, medium-sized, large. We want different crop types, different livestock, different forest operations. We want to make sure from an equity standpoint that everybody gets to participate. So this is one arrow in our quiver here at USDA, but I think it's a very important one.
You've talked there and in the announcement about the importance of monitoring, reporting and verification to demonstrate the climate smart outcomes, to ensure that they're real. And again, that's a similar part of the debate that's taking place in Europe. How do you know that it works and has the effect that you want? Could you just say a little bit more about why you think that really is important for building trust and confidence in these programs? And then as a build on that, given the plethora of climate projects and programs that have sprung up in the United States and the European Union over the last few years, how can growers and ranchers make informed choices about the quality of the programs that they're going to join?
Yeah, I mean, the first part of your question is incredibly important. We're, in essence, asking the U.S. taxpayer to come help our farmers, ranchers, forest owners put these practices in place. We want to know what the outcomes are. And so in the context of this program, that monitoring verification is really, really important. It's actually important way beyond the program for many of the reasons you raise. It's vitally important that that markets understand where their investments are paying off, that the public, we've got to maintain public confidence in this as well. I've been at the climate change policy debate around agriculture and forestry for a long time. And there's been a lot of hand-wringing and teeth gnashing about, does this stuff count? What do we have to, if we're offsetting it, is it real, is it permanent, all that stuff. Our best argument is to have data and to demonstrate that this can actually work. I am very confident it can work. I'm very confident we can track it over time. But no one's going to take me or anybody else at their word. And so we have to make investments in the U.S. in monitoring and verification and all that. We've got to make investments in better inventory. We have a very good forest inventory in this country. We need to improve it in the context of climate. We have a very good inventory on the ag side. We've got a lot of work to do there to make it better. And again, important for market confidence, important for public confidence, and to know where and how we should be spending our dollars. I forgot the second piece of your question.
How can we ensure that growers and ranchers make informed choices about the quality of the programs that they're joining, given the plethora of projects and pilots that have sprung up, both in Europe but also here in the United States?
To me, there's sort of two parts to this question. One is there are a lot of methodologies and standards and things out there, and how do we deal with that? And what we're saying right now at USDA is we're going to try some things, we're going to pilot some things, we're going to learn from that. But what we hear from our farmers, ranchers, forest owners, and others is concern about the number of standards. How do they know? How do they navigate this? And I think we'll do some learning here, but there's a longer term question, what role in USDA in those markets? Right now we provide a lot of data that is used, and that's really important. We haven't got into the standard setting business. I don't know that we want to go there or not. That's going to be a conversation with U.S. agriculture and forestry. What's the best, and the market, what's the best way for us to improve the credibility here? The first part of your question is really important for all of our landowners and our producers. We're asking them to make investments in climate smart practices. They've got some other things they need to do, whether it's grow a crop or whether it's livestock, whatever it is. And we're asking them to undertake those investments. We need to give them better data on what the outcomes of those are, both for climate mitigation, the potential opportunities there for them, but on the resilience side there. Can soil health practices improve the resilience of their soils to drought? Are there opportunities to reduce the threat of forests to wildfire? We need better data on the front end for those producers to understand exactly what that investment yields in terms of not only production, but also the co-benefits that go along with that.
I want to come back to the standard setting piece in a second, particularly in relation to the collaboration with the European Union in that area. Before I do, you touched on this in your answer about how growers and ranchers have confidence to make the investment. There are people, stakeholders, both in the European Union but also here, some of them political, that say this is a distraction. The climate agenda, it's a distraction. Their primary focus is producing food, safe, healthy, affordable food. How do you respond to that criticism?
So there are almost two arguments there. One is there are actually folks in the environmental community have argued this is an energy problem. Why are we talking about agriculture? And then there are other folks that make the argument you're talking about. We only have to look across the U.S. landscape of the last decade to see that climate change is here. It's real. We're having to adapt to it. I had a congressman the other day say to me, my farmers and ranchers aren't talking about climate change. My response was, no, they're not, but they're talking about extreme weather events, they're talking about drought, and they're talking about wildfire. And so in this country, you've seen, I was here in 2009 and 10 at the beginning of the Obama administration, lots of concern in agriculture and forestry about what climate policy would look like. And so agriculture and forestry stakeholders are very nervous about even engaging in the conversation. They're in a very different place now. They are at the table, engaged, and recognizing both the mitigation potential, but also that this is an important conversation about resilience and the future of agriculture. And so we're having a really productive conversation with agriculture and forestry. And on the environment side, there's a growing understanding that if you want to make the math work by 2050, that we actually need to address agriculture and forestry. And I think we've made a lot of progress there as well. I think with the public, we still have some work to do to get them to understand that land actually matters and all this. It matters for a lot of other reasons too, obviously food and fiber amongst them, and conservation and wildlife and those types of things. But I think we have some work to do with the public to get them to understand, hey, agriculture and forestry actually have a game to play here.
It's interesting to see the similar dynamics that are taking place here, as indeed in the European Union. Given the similarities of the approach, and I think that they are quite significant, do you see yourself climate-smart commodities as being an area that you'd want to collaborate with the European Union on? And if so, in what form? And without wishing to lead you, we talked earlier about standards and standard setting. There could be a plethora of standards in the United States. There could be a plethora of standards in the European Union. Is that an area where the two sides could potentially come together and say, this is what good looks like?
Yeah, I think that there's an important dialogue to have there. Clearly, we're going to need convergence at some point. What's going to be important for us domestically is to have agriculture and forestry come along, as well as the scientific community, the environmental community, come along for that, and to have input, and to feel like there's some recognition that the standards conversation is important. They're telling us it's important right now, but how we do it, making sure that the standards we produce are cost effective, I think that's really important. And I think it's unavoidable in international trade markets for us to have this conversation. There are a ton of places where we need to work with you all, we can learn from you all, and potentially vice versa. And so having our scientists and our farmers and ranchers and others exchanging information, understanding what Europe's doing versus what the U.S. is doing, I think is critically important. We need to strengthen the alliance. You know, on the climate, we're all in this together. I think there's a lot to learn, and I do think there's enough interest in the markets internationally that thinking about how that convergence happens and how we create an open dialogue so that it works for your producers just as it works for our producers.
Right. And then kind of building on that, if I may, Mr. Undersecretary, last November, Secretary Vilsack and Commissioner Wojciechowski came together in Brussels to launch a transatlantic platform for collaboration on agriculture. An area which, if we're honest, the two sides under multiple administrations and leadership in the Commission, in the European Commission, not always seen eye to eye on. How important do you think that is? What progress are you seeing over the past 6 months since that was launched, and what comes next?
Well, and again, this is a critically important dialogue. It's a critically important understanding to understand your all's position, ours, and others, and I do think there's a lot of common ground here that we can take advantage of. and a recognition, part of the conversation we're having is about deployment of climate smart practices and what that looks like and what those practices are, and conversations about inputs and all those things. And I think that's important. I think we're going to need, we want to, from a U.S. perspective, stay focused on outcomes, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, continued productivity, amongst others. And we're also having this argument, or not argument, we're having this conversation about what do we do about the world's forests and tropical deforestation and the role that commodities play in that as well. And that's a place where as productivity of our agricultural lands actually matters a lot, because we don't want to shift production to other parts of the world which may impact forests and create deforestation. So this conversation about maintaining productivity turns out to be really important from a climate standpoint. Obviously, reducing emissions is incredibly important from a climate standpoint. And I think, working through what differences we may have, but also the commonality, the research and other things is going to be really, really important. And, we sometimes think about this problem in the context of we've got to hit net zero by 2050. We've also got to feed 9+ billion people by 2050, and that is a critically important part of the challenge. And I think that conversation in the context of climate is really important as well.
So perhaps final question to you, Mr. Undersecretary. Over the last 6 months, we've seen a number of international meetings focused on this interface between climate, environment, food production. UN Food Systems Summit last September, leading into COP26. We build towards COP27 this year. All have implications for the transformation of the food and agriculture system globally. So when you reflect on the various steps that have been taken by the United States and indeed by your partners around the world, how would you assess the progress to meeting those goals of a more resilient, sustainable, climate-ready global food and agriculture system?
I think I look back to where we were 10 and 15 years ago. I think we've made enormous progress. We had a very hard time having a conversation about agriculture and forestry in the context of the climate talks and other things. And agriculture in particular was very sensitive. And we're at a place now where we're all having this conversation. Everybody recognizes its importance. And I think in that sense, we've made enormous progress. Our challenge is the clock is ticking. We know we've got aggressive timelines to meet by 2030, aggressive timelines by 2050. And so we've made progress. We have a long way to go. And how do we align incentives there? How do we both recognize the governments have an important role to play here, just as the markets do? And we've got a lot of learning to do quickly to figure out how we deploy this quickly while we maintain the productivity of agriculture and forestry, which is really, really important. So there are huge challenges, but I feel really good in the progress we've made and in the conversation that we're having and in the learning that's taking place. And it's a huge challenge, but I think we can get there.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Undersecretary, and also for taking the time to join our program this year. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you and to listen to your insights and thinking about how we address this important topic. Thank you very much again, and we do look forward to seeing you again sometime very near future at the Forum for the Future of Agriculture.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you. It was indeed a great opportunity and pleasure for the Forum to be able to speak to Robert Bonney. I don't think anybody believes that Europe exists in isolation, particularly given the challenges that we see in the world today. And to get the United States perspective, the Department of Agriculture's perspective on how they interpret this challenge of farm and food productivity in the context of sustainability, resilience, and indeed making agriculture climate ready was an important contribution, I think, to our debate at the Forum over the past month or so. Well, I'm now joined by video link from our studio here in Brussels by two of our extremely valued strategic partners. Marie Brusser is entrepreneurship lead at Thought for Food. I think it's fair to say probably the leading network in the world for bringing together next generation young agripreneurs to take on the challenges that we face. And a great pleasure as well to welcome back Galina Pesheva. We've had the opportunity, Galina, to talk many times over the past month. You are one of Bulgaria's, if not Europe's, leading innovative farmer and landowner, particularly in the area of regenerative agriculture. Great to have you both with us. Galina, I'm going to pick up and start with you, if I may, with a question that we also touched on some of the events that we were part of earlier in the month. When you listen to Robert Bonney, when you hear the Commissioner's remarks, you hear Janis's introduction today, from your perspective, where do you think we are on this journey towards food and agriculture transformation, whether in Bulgaria, Europe, or even globally?
Thank you, Mark. In my opinion, and it might sound optimistic, but we have come a long way. 10 or 12 years ago, no one outside a very narrow circle was talking about sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, or soil health. There was limited societal awareness or demand for traceability and accountability in terms of how agri inputs were produced or sourced, besides whether an input was biocertified or conventionally grown. As we can all see, we are at a very different place now. People, and I'm very happy to see young people and especially millennials, are engaged and recognize the importance of the issue and partake not only nominally but also by personal example. There is a growing understanding among the general public that if we want to meet climate mitigation goals, we actually need to address agriculture. Governments in the EU, the US, and the global community have also all taken concrete and very ambitious measures and goals to make the agri-transformation happen. So I'm very much convinced that the results will follow.
Galina, thanks. I'm going to come to you then, Marie. I mean, similar question. You look across your network. What is the view of the young agripreneurs that you bring together? Where do they think we are on this journey?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Thanks you for having me here today. I think, we've heard this today as well. The transformation needs to happen. And I think all the players in the food system have agreed that this needs to happen now. And we're having more and more people getting involved. So we at Thought for Food work with next generation people, with startups from all around the world, and we're seeing more and more getting involved. It's not just, the backgrounds and the knowledge bases that we expect, but it's also people from different industries coming together, lending their knowledge to create a change in food and agriculture. And so having all these people streaming in with their different backgrounds really does create a plethora of opportunities. But at the same time, I think the feeling is that there's a little bit of a stalemate of who will lead the transformation and who's going to pay for it. Because of course, money is involved here too. And so the feeling is a little bit, and I think we've seen it throughout the events as well, that companies might be waiting on the policies, the policymakers are waiting on consumers, and consumers don't necessarily have the information that they need or the possibility to make their voices heard. So I think the question on the transformation is, well, where do we all start? And we might just need a disruption to kick things off. And that disruption might be something external, like the pandemic, like wars that we're seeing, on our doorstep, but also, of course, in other parts of the world. And those will force us to change. But the alternative is that we step up and we create the change using control and agency, and we create the food system that we want to see. And what that allows us to do is to act in a controlled manner and not out of fear and necessity. And I think right now in the journey of agri-food transformation, to come back to your question, is really that we're at the cusp of a big transformation. And now it's deciding which path to go on. Do we, think in the long term? Do we start it now? Or do we keep reacting to these really big shocks that are coming our way and that are getting bigger and bigger as well?
if we can do, Marie, I mean, you touched on money as maybe one element. When you go and you talk to the people in your network, what are they telling you that they need in order to realize their ambitions, whatever area of the food chain that they're part of?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, we work in really every part of the food system. So that's from growing your new crops to your new packaging to, apps to look at your sourcing or traceability. What those startups have in common is, of course, they need the funding, but there is more capital coming in as well. So we're seeing that both on the VC side. So there is more and more interest in the food and ag space, but also alternative ways of funding. So there's crowdfunding, there's, DeFi and Web3 are offering new opportunities there as well. But of course, it is on the one hand on the money, but on the other side as well on who will back it. Because a startup might have a great idea, it might be a way to shape the future of the food system, but to take it from an idea, from that prototype or from that little organization that they have to that big disruption, some other players are needed. And that's where big corporates, where those global companies can come in. And by them, offering their time as mentorship or backing those companies and saying, this is something really great, let me connect, let me open those doors for you, we see that having a real big impact. And that's, I think, a way that some of those larger companies that might be slower to change, just simply because they are so big and change is slower, they can really support those changes happening faster by teaming up with those startups and those small organizations and even individuals that we work with.
And yeah, I'm going to come to Galina in a second on what it might take to accelerate regenerative agriculture. But just before I do, Maria, just to come back to you on that point that you had about medium to large size corporations. It's not just money, it's mentorship, it's ideas. Do you feel that more of them are beginning to get involved in your space now and to help incubate, to grow some of the ideas that you're seeing in your network?
Yes, certainly. I think the movement is there. We've seen it in the FFA events, but we also see it at Thought for Food, where we do have more of those larger companies getting involved because all of us need to move towards a more sustainable and even regenerative food system. And some of those startups are paving the way. And so what companies, are able to do when they work with startups is to see some of those new ideas, but also some of those new mindsets. And as much as it is about the technologies, it's also about the approaches being used, about the ways some of the new technologies that haven't been in the past are coming together, in the way that the people we work with, and so they might not all have food tech backgrounds, agriculture backgrounds. They might be artists. They might be coming together and creating something that is never seen before. And what happens when we open that door and open that conversation is that mindsets change, and some of those ideas that at first seem quite scary, quite different, they get taken seriously and mindsets start to change and new ideas start to be made. And so that creates that drive and that change that can then be taken internally in some of those big global companies as well. So of course, if there are some listening here and they want to get involved, TFF is always there to do that, same as the FFA, to bring those people together. And that's what we want to do.
It's what I've always loved about Thought for Food, Maria. It's seeing the challenge that we have through completely different lenses, and sometimes that's what we need to get the breakthroughs. Galina, I'm going to come back to you on this point on regenerative agriculture, which has come up a number of times throughout our program over the last month. You in Bulgaria, you adopted regenerative agriculture practices 10 years ago as part of this ambition to get to a more transformative, sustainable food system. Just tell us a little bit more about what you have experienced over those 10 years, what you've needed in order to sustain your progress. And if I may, I'll remind you of the question if you forget, but what do you think we need going forward to scale regenerative agriculture across Europe?
Oh, Mark, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. To answer it, I actually need to give some personal perspective. I'm proud to say that my farm is a great example of a successful nature-positive business. We are profitable, we are sustainable, and we do way more than is required. I want to be honest with you and admit that it didn't happen overnight. It took almost 10 years to gradually find out what works and what doesn't. The trial and error approach was very costly and time consuming, and we made many unnecessary steps or even wrong steps along the way. So on one hand, we have this. On the other, we have, and it was brought up more than a few times, that establishing baseline requirements and measurements to evaluate the progress will be very difficult and may border on the subjective, as sustainable farming demands regionally specific knowledge and is grounded in the particular crops grown within local climates and soils. So, according to me, if we want this to work, decision makers should step in and help farmers bear the costs associated with transitioning to sustainable farming. I can vouch from personal experience that farmers will need practical evidence that the nature positive approach will work economically before they try it on a large scale. They will need models for what it actually looks like in their own region. Only when they come to the farm, see and touch the crops, will they actually believe that this works. We can build resilient farms and we can scale up communities by hosting programs and field days, conducting on farm research rooted in farmer questions, and building a peer to peer network of farmers exchanging knowledge and experience.
As always, Galina, you are far clearer and more succinct in your answer to the questions than I am sometimes in putting them. And I really appreciate you sharing your personal perspective on that and what's needed to move forward. A final question, if I may, to both of you, and I will start with you, Galina. When you step back from your own farm in Bulgaria, when you step back and you look at the system as a whole, what gives you cause for optimism that we can build a food and agriculture system that is more resilient, sustainable, and climate ready?
Well, the fact that we are all gathered here today is a great example that we've made enormous progress. This conversation simply did not exist 10 years ago, or it was severely limited. If the US and the EU and the global community are having a conversation about agriculture in the context of climate change, this means we are making the right stride. We are still at the beginning of the journey, and there are many, many challenges, and we are aware of that. But nevertheless, I feel really optimistic about the progress made and about the conversation we are having. We all know it's a big challenge, but I think we can get there because I believe that for the first time we have collectively, not only politically, but as a society, realized that we absolutely have to do this. It's not a matter of if.
And to you,
So,
Marie,
thank
I
you.
mean, if we haven't got optimism amongst the next generation, we're in trouble, aren't we? But I think you'll tell me that you have a lot of cause for optimism.
Yeah, well, I was just listening to the answer Galina gave, and I thought, well, truth be told, I don't know what the discussions were 10 years ago. I joined this a little bit later, and so I guess my time frame is a little bit shorter, but there is cause for optimism. First of all, because if we only talk about fear, then there is no action, right? So we need to focus on some of the positive messages as well to drive action. And that's the way I tend to see the world. But more importantly, when we talk about food and agriculture, there is data and numbers to back this up as well, because we have more and more people getting involved in this sector, and more people studying food and agriculture related topics. So that's young people at university, but that's also older people who want to come into the sector, who want to discover what there is. They're realizing that this is a place to have a career, this is a place to make money, to make a difference, to have an impact. And that is something that more and more people want to do. And so we have an influx of people and talent. We also have, we mentioned this just now, there's more capital than before. And so that is an enabler at the end of the day. So we see that as well. And then we have more technologies than ever before. And that, of course, goes beyond food and agriculture. But some of the technologies that are available to us today were just not there a few years ago. And they can be used in ways we've never seen before. And that goes back to also measuring what goes on in this huge, complex global system, right? We've heard at the FFA annual event that we can measure the externalities that go into our food. And if it's not in the price of our food, and when we pay it, it is with the price on the environment, the price on our health. And so all of that data, all of that knowledge put together is a way forward for us. And so I think we have the people, the capital, the technologies, and the knowledge, and all of that combined creates a really good setup. And all of that combined will create really great solutions that will create what we need. I think the real question is, will we be courageous enough to drive those forward?
It's a great question to end with. I was greatly encouraged by your perspective and view that the sector is attracting young people to come into it. Of course, those of us that have worked in the sector for a long time love it, but it's good to hear that it's attracting new people as well, which of course is the foundation of all we do. Marie Brusser, Thought for Food, Galina Pesheva, member of the board of the European Landowners Organization, both of you strategic partners in the forum. Thank you so much for your support and everything you do for us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, as Janis said in his introductory remarks, we've had nearly 3 weeks now of policy webinars, solutions workshops, and of course our annual conference on the 15th of March. I hope you'll be able to take the opportunity to look at some of the replays of that in more depth that will be available on our website. But just in case you don't, here's a short video summarising just some of the key highlights from the month of March programme. Well, it's been a breathless month of March, as always, a very extensive programme, and I hope that gave you just a few of the key highlights and insights into what we've been doing at the forum over these past couple of weeks. I'm now joined in the studio by Thierry de la Sky, Secretary-General of the European Landowners Organisation, and by John Parr, by video, President of Syngenta's Crop Protection business. You're both co-founders of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture, so let me start with you, John. You came together with the landowners almost 15 years ago to establish the forum. With this mission of bringing agriculture and environment together, they were perhaps seen as mutually exclusive concepts back at the end of the first decade of the 21st century. To what extent do you think the forum has achieved its goals?
Well, good afternoon, Mark. Hello, Thierry. Pleasure to see you again. Sorry I can't be with you physically, but look, reflecting on 15 years here, Mark, it is quite remarkable, actually. When we started 15 years ago, I don't think we could have imagined how successful it was going to be. We set out to create a space for open exchange on key agricultural topics of the day. But it's incredible to see how that's expanded. And we've had a forum year after year that's talking about the key societal topics and how we tackle some of the biggest challenges of our times. And particularly, I think, climate change. The agri-food sector is for sure front and centre of many of these discussions. And so for us to have the leading agri-food event in Brussels, which brings together not just the EU, but also global stakeholders, as we've even seen in this session today, this is a real point of pride for us. But I don't think there's room for complacency. The words are great, the discussion's phenomenal, but it's the actions that come from that make a difference. And for sure, I think we're all mindful that we're at a very special moment, very concerning moment. After 2.5 years of pandemic, I think we've had a light shone clearly on some of the vulnerabilities of a global food supply chain. And now with the conflict that erupted in Ukraine just a month ago, I think we start to see some real risks that there could be a distraction from some of the really important themes of climate change and biodiversity. So, I think that the forum has a really important role to play in the present and into the future as well. And that my personal theme is to ensure that science is used to address some of these issues. For example, being very mindful of the carbon mass balance of the global food systems that we have. And making sure that we continue to talk about nurturing innovation to solve the equations that currently are not working for us. So, I think overall, Mark, it's been a phenomenal experience, a great journey over 15 years, and really proud of what's been achieved and all the people that the forum has managed to bring together.
Thank you, John. I'll come back to you in a moment to ask you about what you think Syngenta is going to do going forward. But let me bring Thierry into the conversation. Again, in it from the start, 15 years ago, John's given his perspective on the last 15 years. What's yours? Is the forum meeting the objective?
Well, as John rightly said, we could not imagine that we would be so far with the forum. So I can say that the forum has met its objective, but we have addressed other objectives, so we are much more ambitious. And I have to say, in 2008, we were addressing two things, the food and the price crisis and the biodiversity crisis. Today, they are still on board. It is evolved with new parameters. And also we were there to make sure farmers, civil society, NGOs could meet and have a normal, sustainable dialogue. And we have been extremely successful into it, and we have evolved into it. We have invited thousands of stakeholders. We have been invited hundreds of speakers to join, from Kofi Annan to Bob Zolik, from, let me address one coming to my mind, Tony Long. Tony Long has been a very fair partner of the forum. He has been a speaker many times and extremely fair in his comments towards the farmers, towards the environmentalists. And I take the opportunity to address my deep condolence to WWF, because Tony has just left us, but he has made a strong impression and impact on this forum. And really, I believe that this forum is continuing thanks to the intervention of people like Tony, like Kofi Annan, like Jeffrey Sachs, or others who came with their ideas. We were addressing things. We, the farmers, were not thinking necessarily about it. But they have been extremely helpful to us to accept that today we are in a crisis, we have to move into this crisis, and that we have to make sure the biodiversity goals, the climatic goals are achieved. At the time, we still have to produce and to produce food and feed to the world. And this is crucial, and this forum is a fair room for dialogue where we can meet all together in an open spirit.
Chair, a follow-up question, if I may. John referred to it, alluded to himself. We've had COVID, we've got conflict, we've got climate change. What do you think that means for the food and agriculture system, both here in Europe and globally?
Yeah, you're quite right. It's a stress, and we understand that we have to address the triple C: COVID, climate, and a conflict issue. And it is inviting us to address insight into our society and our food system. What means that, of course, we have to take on board the Ukrainian crisis. Is not a tiny story. I'm a farmer myself. I can tell you it has an impact in my farm today on the decision as a farmer I will make. But I'm also impacted, such as my colleague, by the two other crises. And if we are not taking into account the urgency of the biodiversity and the climate crisis, we are completely wrong. So the question we have to address, and we are invited by the dialogue of the forum, is to make a bridge between the three crises. And many times farmers have the feeling that they are not listened. And I think the drama, I will say, of the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork is that the right questions are addressed, but maybe the timing is not super because it's at the time of reform of CAP. So there is a confusion of middles to go to the objective, which is not facilitating the life of the farmers. We have to address, we have to make sure we get this sorted out. And this is what our forum in March has been trying to do, to give hope to the farmers, to make sure farmers can find a way and find a way to not only to be accepted by society, to be useful for society, but also to be sustainably profitable in their businesses.
So to build on that, and also the comments of John, I'm going to come to you, John, on this. I mean, the forum was set up to catalyse new thinking, new ideas. We've heard from Yanis this morning. This afternoon, he talked about words being very important, but actions being even more important. What's Syngenta going to do about trying to make this system more resilient, sustainable, and climate ready?
Well, at Syngenta, we've believed in action for a long time, Mark. There's no question about that. I mean, I think it's important when a crisis strikes, and we have three crises in parallel running here, as you've just referenced. I mean, the climate crisis, you have the COVID pandemic crisis, and now you have a conflict crisis. I think one of the most important things to do is to make sure you keep a sense of perspective. And one of the most valuable things you can do when this is happening is to engage with the wider community, because I think we're all agreed that there's a system change required here that in part in the medium and long term will address all of these issues. But in the short term, we have to deal with the most acute crises that exist. So the first thing we're trying to do is, for example, to make sure that we're able to support Ukrainian farmers to the very best of our ability and see how much of their planting we can support and make happen. After all, there's 40-something million Ukrainians, but I read today that it's estimated that they're contributing to the food security of 400 million people globally. So I think it's important to keep a sense of that perspective, but we certainly aren't going to lose sight of the bigger picture, and we will continue to do the things that we've committed to. You know, it's about 8 years ago that we launched the Good Growth Plan with a number of goals aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals that were announced. And we've done some remarkable things there. For example, I think we have influenced the biodiversity positively on almost 6.5 million hectares during that time. In 2019, we announced new commitments to inform our research and development in line with societal needs and in line with environmental targets. And we're busily working along those lines as well. So I think it's important to understand that we can't do this on our own. We have to do it in partnership, but relying on science and innovation and technology and working with farmers and working in the context of the whole food supply chain, that's where Syngenta is trying to make a difference.
Thierry, similar question to you, really. European Landowners Organisation. I mean, your members have the ability to influence large swaths of European farmland to build that resilience and sustainability into the system. How are you helping them?
Yes, I think it's crucial that we set up system helping them to implement that need. And this is the reason why we have launched many years ago, already about 10 years ago, the label Wildlife Estate with the support of DG Environment and the participation of different NGOs. And it is a way to attract farmers, to give them the proudness to act properly in favor of biodiversity. Now we are going a step further, and we are also setting up a new system, which is Agrilife. It is inviting farmers to farm for biodiversity, to take biodiversity as one of the elements of their business, and not to say it is a side business, it's only a side and we don't have to take that much into account. No, I think it's crucial. We do believe that there is no need to oppose conventional to organic farming practices. They are all invited to farm in favor of biodiversity, and there is a way to do it, and this is really offering an option. And I also believe that as an organization, with the forum, we are moving into the different countries. We are meeting partners, we are meeting farmers everywhere this year. The forum will go to the countries taking over the presidency in the Czech Republic and in Sweden, and it will be once again an opportunity to meet farmers, the local farmer and their presidency, and to define their needs and to define how we can help them to achieve what they have to do. This is our mission, and we are really dedicated to achieve it.
So I know we're slightly pressed for time, but I'm going to ask both of you as a concluding part of this session. Thierry, how confident are you we can achieve this goal of a more resilient food and agriculture system, one that's sustainable and climate ready?
I'm deeply convinced that it is achievable without much difficulties. I just will relay on what John has said about the Good Growth Plan. It is an excellent example. It was really cross-fertilization for us. We have also been using other techniques. And honestly, if we take the farmers on board, and if the politicians don't have a top-down approach, it would be much more easier to achieve it. Take with you the farmers, do it with them, and we will win this battle all together. But together, such as mentioned Geneviève Pons and Pascal Lamy, together we will do it, not the one against the other.
John Parr, do you share that sentiment?
I do, actually. I think it's something we have to do together. I'm hugely confident that we have the knowledge and the know-how to build resilient agricultural food production systems that are environmentally sustainable. I'm convinced that we can address the climate challenge technically. What I do concern myself about is whether we can do these things quickly enough, and in particular in the current crisis, whether we can avert a food security crisis in the short term as a result of this conflict. But the answer is with Thierry. I mean, if we can do this, we can do it together, and we have to rely on farmers playing their part in this, and we have to support them in doing so.
Very much so. Well, thank you to both of you, John, Thierry, founding partners of the Forum. I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't be here without you. That's stating the obvious. Don't go away, because both of you have played a very important part in the next section of our programme today. It brings us to the presentation of the prestigious Land Management and Soil Award. If soil really is the bedrock of a more sustainable and resilient food and agriculture system, this award certainly plays its part. In case you don't know too much about it already, here's a short video to remind you. Well, I don't know about you, but I find that hugely inspiring as I look back across the years in terms of the past award winners of this prestigious Land Management and Soil Award. And so we come to the presentation part of today's programme. I'm joined in the studio by Andrea Vettori from Commissioner Sinkevicius Environment Cabinet in the European Commission. Very warm welcome to you. To other members of the Soil and Land Management Award jury, great to see you. And of course to Professor Martin Geusebeck from Boca University in Vienna. And Professor Geusebeck, to introduce the award to us and to announce, most importantly, the winner of this year's 2022 award, I'll give you the floor. Professor Geusebeck.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you today for this important occasion. And let me say that by introducing the EU Soil Strategy 2030, the European Commission demonstrates the great importance of soils for the future of humanity and the EU in particular. The current crisis, and we have heard that already during the past hours, clearly shows that quantitative and qualitative soil protection is of extremely important significance in the European Union, and prioritizing our valuable soils as the basis for sustainable food security is the need of the hour. The Land and Soil Management Award is intended to put precisely these aspects in the spotlight. So the award is annually granted to an outstanding project contributing to and being a model for soil protection from the viewpoint of agricultural practice. The prize rewards land use and soil management practices mitigating soil threats like soil degradation, erosion, reduction of organic matter content, diffuse contamination and compaction, as well as the reduction of soil biodiversity, salinization, sealing, flooding, and landslides. The prize is open to farmers, landowners, land managers, groups of farmers, research institutes, universities, and private companies. Let me first thank all the supporters of this important and quite unique award: the European Landowners Association, the European Commission, the Joint Research Centers, Syngenta, the University of Ljubljana, and my own university, the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, Vienna. This year, the jury received 12 applications, really excellent ones. So we had a good choice amongst the eligible proposals. The projects were submitted from Bulgaria, Czech Republic, France, Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Spain. And let me thank here all the applicants for their very valuable contributions. We learned a lot. I thank the jury members cordially for their time, dedication, and also long-lasting support of the award. So, namely, Thierry Delescay, Francisco Gracia Verde, Frank Lobnik, Luca Montanarella, and Claudia Olazabal. And I cordially thank Emmanuel Mikos for her excellent support of the process. The winner of this year is Improving Soil Aggregation for Soil Protection, Soil Improvement, Proper Water Management, Carbon Storage, and Food Safety, a project submitted by the Geographical Institute of the Research Center for Astronomy and Earth Sciences in Budapest, represented by Dr. Balázs Madaras and the farmer István Plotar. The main objectives of the project are soil and surface water protection by applying conservation agriculture and to undertake a complex comparison of conventional and conservation tillage methods, taking technical, economic, environmental, and social aspects into account. The project is based on long-term agricultural trials, the results of which are intensively communicated to the local population, the region, and also the scientific community by high-ranking publications. The jury was especially impressed by the long duration of the experiments of 19 years, which is not easy to achieve for a research institute. Thanks to the continuous demonstration activities, the advantages of conservation tillage are now well known in the region as well as on the national level, including farmers, policymakers, and government officials. The jury sees this initiative as a model for the implementation of the third mission of academic institutions in agriculture and an important step to foster introduction of conservation agriculture into common agricultural practices. Additional to the award-winning project, the jury decided to honor 2 further proposals by diploma of recognition, which will be introduced later. On behalf of the jury, I would like to congratulate the successful projects and wish them continued success, of course. I call now the representative of the award-winning consortium, Zoltán Szalay, on the floor and ask for his contribution and speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So we are really honored to receive the Land and Soil Management Award. So increasing soil biodiversity, organic matter content, and less erosion is not impossible under arable farming. Also, here are still many skeptics nowadays, at least in Hungary, but conservation farming is spreading. We may also have had a role in some farmers considering regenerative agriculture could be an applicable alternative. And demonstrating the benefits of conservation tillage and disseminating its technology remains our priority. We have received a lot of support from different stakeholders over the past 19 years. Thank you to everyone. And I would like to highlight among them the support of the landowner, Mr. Plotar, the support of the European Union and Syngenta. I would like to thank you all for the honor again. Thank you, colleagues.
Zoltán, many congratulations indeed on behalf of the Forum. I wish you every success with you and your consortium for the future of your project. I'm also taken back by probably 15, 16 years ago, one of the first projects that I worked on in soil management was in Hungary. And so great to see your country contributing the winner to this year's Land Management and Soil Award. Many congratulations to you indeed.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to come to Andrea Vittori now, if I may. Andrea, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in the studio. Before you introduce the special recognition diploma, I want to ask you, on behalf of DG Environment, how important do you think soil health is in terms of this bigger concept of achieving food and agriculture sustainability?
Thank you very much, Mark. Indeed, soil is, I think, looking at the time scale of this award, a lot of things have changed. And one of them is clearly that the awareness of the role of soil for our economy, for our society, for our ecology is much, much higher today than was the past. And this award is contributed to this, certainly in Europe. So it's clear that soil is essential for food security. We're seeing today where everybody's looking at land for this, to ensure also renewable energy, to ensure biodiversity, climate adaptation, and so on. But we know also how it is essential for climate mitigation in terms of CO2 reductions, how much is essential to ensure the resilience, not only of agriculture, but really our villages and rural areas to climate change, and for biodiversity as well. So the fact that today 60 to 70% of the soil ecosystems in Europe are degrading is really an important challenge that we need to address. This is why many years ago the European Commission and the Environment decided to partner with Syngenta and the European Landowner Organization for this award, to really select the many, out of the many practices and good examples that we have throughout the EU, the best experiences that will provide an example for all the others. This is a work that has been done in the past, will continue in the future. You mentioned that the Commission has worked on has adopted a new soil strategy at the end of last year. We will work very much with all the stakeholders now to work towards implementing it and developing really the specific tools to achieve its vision to 2050. Which relies really on the healthy of soil ecosystems for food security, climate change, biodiversity, and all the many services that soil provide. But this can only be done in partnership with those who work on the soil. So clearly the farmers, the landowners, the foresters are clearly the key partners in this endeavor. And this is why we fully support the activities of this award. So if you agree, I can move towards the announcement. Absolutely. Indeed, as the chair of the jury mentioned, there have been 12 very good applications, so it was quite a challenge for the jury to select the winner and then those projects that deserved a special mention. And indeed, this project provides a clear example how this transformational change is not only possible, but is essential for the future of agriculture and not only. So it is my pleasure to announce today the two diplomas of recognition, and the first one goes to the farm Laubier Almazet, whose representative unfortunately could not be today with us. But however, the French farm has been applying the agroecological approach for almost 2 decades and fighting against soil erosion and preserving biodiversity through the implementation of adapted and innovative practices, such as establishing various plant covers, planting hedges, creating a network of ponds, implementing agroforestry, and many more. An excellent example of sustainable soil management practices which are so needed for our healthy soil. So I would really like to congratulate them and thank them for participating. The second diploma of recognition of this year's Land and Soil Management Award goes to Kielen Agroforestry by Guten Bösel. This regenerative organic farm has, among other things, implemented the syntropic kaolin agroforestry system designed to minimize soil erosion while enhancing biodiversity, building up humus and efficiently using the scarce resource water in one of Germany's driest areas, located 1 hour east of Berlin. Their farming is constantly looking for new solutions that go beyond organic farming, working together with experts and pioneers from all over the world, and most importantly, focusing on the ground, because, as they say, everything stands and falls with it. So all this effort and dedication deserve really our sincere admiration, and I'm really pleased to congratulate and ask maybe Max Kustner, who is today representing the farm Guten Bösel, to tell us more about this innovative farm.
Yes, thank you very much. So congratulations to Hungary, and thank you to the Forum for the Diploma of Recognition. My name is Max Küsters. I am the head of data and science here at Guten Bösel. We are located, as it was said, 1 hour east of Berlin and have very sandy soils and low precipitation. And we are very pleased to see that our work is recognized internationally. We farm organically on 3,000 hectares of land and use regenerative practices to build up soil health and create resistant ecosystems. We planted roughly 50 hectares of agroforestry systems by now. We manage our 150 cows in a holistic grazing approach, and we close nutrient cycles with our own compost and tree nursery. So in this particular agroforestry example, that which we applied with, we planted a highly diverse mix of more than 5,000 trees and shrubs on 3 hectares in a keyline-based system to hold, as it was said, as much water in the system as is possible. We also gathered all relevant ecological and economical data with our newly established foundation. So be it labor hours and costs, soil moisture, nutrient density, and biodiversity. Because, as it was said earlier in this forum, we also believe that we need to find out the real costs and values of our systems and model and scale them. So we are certain that this land use really goes beyond sustainable. It's regenerative for the soil and the whole environment, and it is completely independent. It works without external inputs. We need to focus on such value-giving land use systems, and we need to start putting our money, our knowledge, and our technology in this form of agriculture. So again, thank you very much for this diploma of recognition. And I herewith invite you to contact me with questions, with thoughts, and also with ideas for cooperations. Thank you.
Max, many thanks indeed. Congratulations to you, also to Elise. I know she couldn't join us today, but for both of you winning those diplomas of recognition, very important. Guten Borsel, of course, represented in the past by Benedict Borsel at the Forum, a good friend of us here, and so great to see progress continuing on your farms and indeed on Elise's. I just want to thank again the members of the jury, Francisco Garcia Verdi, Professor Frank Lobnek, and of course Luca Montanarella and Professor Gerzebeck for his chairmanship. To you, Andrea, as well from DG Environment, thank you for supporting, and also again to John Parr from Syngenta and Thierry de la Sky from the European Landowners Organisation. It's been terrific to be able to use today to present that award, and thank you again to all of you that have been involved and to all those that participated and contributed to this year's award. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, that almost brings us to the end of today's programme and indeed to the end of the month of March programme as a whole. It has been a breathless counter through various policy webinars, solutions workshops and our annual conference, as I said a few moments ago. To illustrate the breathlessness and no doubt tiredness at the end of that, but no doubt deep satisfaction as well, we're joined by Emmanuel Mikosh, the Programme Director of the Forum. When you look back on the last couple of weeks, I assume you must do so with great satisfaction.
Yes, indeed, and I'm very happy also to be here. It was in an incredible month with a great team and also with you, Mark, so thank you very much also for being with us. So yeah, more than 15 events, more than 2,000 people joining. A full month and still more to come.
And just tell us a little bit about what more we can expect to look forward to at the Forum in the months ahead.
So now we have the regional events ahead of us. On the 18th of May, that's the regional event in Czech Republic, Prague. So we will be sending all information soon. And then the last week of November, the regional event in Sweden.
Very good. Well, best of luck with that. The programme for the Forum over the course of the year has grown into something incredibly rich, diverse, and continues to foster that spirit of new thinking and ideas that help us to achieve our objectives. Emma, thank you very much for everything that you've done, along with Caroline Marr and the entire team over the last month. I should say months, because the planning for this event started at least 6 months or so ago, so a well-earned rest. Thank you very much indeed. And I should also thank all the speakers and the contributors that were part not just of the annual conference, but the policy webinars and the solutions workshops, the transatlantic dialogues that we've done. It really made for a very rich and diverse programme that we've had over the course of the last month or so. And of course, to all of you, whether you've been able to join us virtually or indeed here in Brussels after a 3-year absence, the conference returned to its spiritual home at the Square, and we were able to see each other again in person. It is indeed a challenging world that we face, as John Parr talked about earlier, the 3 C's: conflict, COVID, and indeed climate change. 4 C's, if I add all those up correctly. It is a changed world, it's a challenging world, but I think we've been reminded at the end of this programme that that transition to a more resilient, sustainable and climate-ready agriculture and food system has never been more important. So thank you for all your contributions. We look forward to seeing you again at one of our events in the very near future. But for now, that's all, folks. See you again soon. Bye-bye.